Thank you, Tony. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. May peace be upon you all. My name is Aman KashIGARiي. And as the Public Affairs Officer and representative of East Turkestan Youth Congress, I appreciate the opportunity to address you today on a matter of great urgency and significance. I'm a member of a nation which is colonized and occupied by the Chinese regime. It was labeled by the Chinese as Xinjiang in 1955. This translates to new colony. But for those who loves freedom, it has always been called East Turkestan. Therefore, it's my duty to bring to your attention a crisis unfolding in the Central Pacific, a crisis whose mitigation is impaired by the congressional delay in funding Compact of Free Association, COFA, and its cunning and ruthless exploited by China to further its tactical ambitions in one of the most strategic regions in the Pacific, near Guam. The COFA, agreement between the United States and several Pacific island nations like Republic of Palau, Federated States of Micronesia, and the Republic of Marshall Islands, has long served as a pillar of stability and cooperation in the region. They represent not just diplomatic ties, but a crucial lifeline for freedom-loving nations, providing essential economic assistance and security assurance. However, the recent delays in funding these compacts have thrown the regions into turmoil, creating a power vacuum that China is all too eager to fill. China's expansionism is already well documented with its border nations, as well as in Central Pacific. Through its Belt and Road Initiative, Peking has sought to extend its influence far beyond its border, as well as using economic leverage to gain political sway. Now, with COFA in limbo due to the congressional inaction, China sees an opportunity to tighten its grip on these vulnerable nations. China's transnational repression efforts don't just focus on dissidents, social activists, political activists, exiled political entities like Tibet and East Turkestan striving to reestablish its independent nations, but also to whom China has deemed as an enemy, the United States of America. China has recently pushed to expand security ties in Kiribati, an island nation approximately 1,000 miles south of Honolulu. It already has a uniformed Chinese officer working with their police community on a crime database program. This is just tip of the iceberg and clear sign for what may to become. Congress must be aware that we cannot afford to underestimate the implication of China's expansion into Central Pacific. Beyond the immediate geopolitical ramification, there are serious concerns about human rights, environmental sustainability like illegal overfishing, and the preservation of democratic value. China's track record in this area leaves much to be desired, and allowing them to uncheck access to the region will be a grave mistake. Speaking on grave mistake, never again is unfolding right now in East Turkestan, where the genocide of my people is carried out systematically at the hands of the Chinese regime, legitimizing the Chinese narrative by its influence agents around the world and entities such as Volkswagen, who benefits from a corrupt financial ecosystem supplied with slave labor and exploited resources. The genocide develops relentlessly in 2024. Millions of East Turkestanis endure the horrors of forced sterilization, coerced abortion, incarceration within concentration camps and prison, while countless more are trapped in a chain of forced labor within camps and factories spanning across East Turkestan and Chinese provinces. The modern-day slavery not only exploits Uyghur labor, but also fuels China's economic growth and global supply chain. Beyond random mass incarceration, intellectuals, community leaders, and religious figures have been specifically targeted, and many have died in concentration camps and prisons. The condition of torture and animalistic cruelty prevailing in camps and prisons are certainly a major cause of death. Nearly 1 million East Turkestani children suffers the anguish of forced separation from their families, subjugated to the coarse grasp of state-sponsored assimilation efforts. Our people's cultural and religious freedom, along with our existence, are under siege, slowly and systematically eroded by the Chinese state and the Chinese Communist Party. Interesting fact. It is through Western technologies like the DNA sequencers, surveillance technology, facial recognition cameras on street corners, mandatory smartphone apps that track individuals' movement and communications, weapons, grants, funds, and other items that the Chinese regimes perpetrate this carnage. All of these atrocities are the result of legacy of colonial policy from various Chinese regimes. Systematic social engineering of our communities in East Turkestan and abroad, and working with influence agents in the diaspora by setting the narrative beforehand. An example is cunning categorization of my people as indigenous people by the CCP only to receive financial incentive as well as set the groundwork for genocidal policies to be exercised on them. Just to restate, East Turkestani people, Uyghurs are indigenous to East Turkestan, but we are not indigenous people. China skillfully uses the term indigenous people for its own benefit in multilateral and bilateral diplomacy against the Western nations. They have literally applied funds from the World Bank to build concentration camps in the name of vocational education and training projects and much more. Since 2002, China has received hundreds of millions of US dollars and an additional of 50 million since 2015 alone. But despite the darkness surrounds us, there is hope. The international community is beginning to wake up on the atrocities being committed in East Turkestan, thanks in large by the tireless efforts of activists, journalists, and organizations like ours. Governments around the world are starting to act, imposing sanctions and other measures to hold China accountable for its crime. But we cannot stop there. We must continue to raise our voices and demand justice for East Turkestani people. We must pressure our government to do more to end the genocide and restore basic human rights in East Turkestan. Across the globe, over 60 organizations of East Turkestani and Uyghurs diaspora, along with their allies, have come together to address the United States Congress to urge a plea to recognize East Turkestan as an occupied nation. This is the only way to get to the real root of the genocide committed by China, the occupation of East Turkestan. Furthermore, we must support like-minded communities wherever they may be, offering solidarity and assistance in these times of needs. It is imperative that Congress act swiftly and approve the funding for COFA, reasserting America's commitment to its allies in the Pacific. This is not just a matter of financial aid. It is a reaffirmation of our value and strategic interest in the region. We must send a clear message to Peking as its attempt to exploit the regional instability. They will not go unchallenged. Furthermore, we must double our efforts to engage with Pacific Island nations on the broader scale. This means investing in infrastructure, promoting sustainability development, and fostering partnership based on mutual respect and cooperation. By strengthening ties with our allies in Central Pacific, we can counteract China's influence and build a more resilient and prosperous region for all. After all, it is the Pacific Island nation of Palau that stood against the Chinese pressure and accepted innocent Uyghurs released from the Guantanamo detention center, while hundreds of other countries couldn't stand against the Chinese pressure. Palau and nations like it have more than proven that they stand with us in our fight against corrupted Chinese influence. It is now our turn to assure them that we stand with them. In conclusion, the crisis in Central Pacific demand our immediate attention and decisive action. As a steward of global security and champion of democracy, we cannot afford to stand idly by while China seeks to undermine the stability of the region. Let us work together to uphold the principle of freedom, democracy, and sovereignty, and ensure a brighter future for the Central Pacific, East Turkestan, and the world. We cannot let the Central Pacific become China's new colony, Xinjiang. In closing, I urge each and every one of you to join our fight for freedom and justice in East Turkestan. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can ensure the voices of the people are heard and their suffering is not forgotten. Let's make sure China is contained between the Pacific coastline and the Great Wall. Thank you.